Welcome to What's the Point? A weekly discussion of truth, realities, challenges, theological and philosophical views, national policies, and international concerns. Welcome to What's the Point? Today we're going to be talking about Esther. Josh is actually moderating today, so he's going to be doing our questions today. So go ahead, Josh, you can get started.
Sounds good. So, the first question that we have, it just talks about who Esther is, right? And, why is she important to the whole overall scope of, the Bible and the Christian faith? So, either one of y'all start.
Okay. It is really important and, in fact, strange in a way that there are only two books in the Old Testament named after women.
Mhm.
And one of those books is Esther. Of course, the other is Ruth.
Yeah.
So they must be very important in the history of the Christian faith. If you remember, Esther was the queen. In fact, she replaced a former queen.
Yeah.
And the king did not know that she was actually a Jew, but she was chosen, and she was there, positioned by God, very much similar like Joseph story. And then there was a threat to the existence of the Jews at the time. Haman, the chief minister, wanted to annihilate totally the Jews. And Esther was a Jew. And this was known by Mordecai. Make the long story short, Esther had to approach the king, even if it is not allowed to approach the king. You need, as a queen, you need to be summoned by the king before you can approach him. But she had courage to approach the king and strategize a way to expose Haman. And in a way, Haman was exposed. Then eventually, Esther got the ruling hand over the kingdom, and he got Mordecai as more like her assistant. So it's a story of it's really more like a political story, more than a religious story, if you like to say.
Yeah, I remember actually a lot about I reread it, but when I was in ICA back when we were in the Philippines, we had Bible week and we had to choose a character and we had to learn about them and dress up as them. And the one that I chose was Esther, because, well, it was pretty unique. A lot of my classmates wanted to be Mary or Miriam, other women in the Bible. But when we picked Esther, I learned a lot about her story really from that, and it kind of stuck with me because I thought kind of what Dad was saying. She's pretty. It is like a political thing, and she's pretty. I wouldn't say like she was powerful because she was the queen, but she was also humble and like she knew like how to do things in like proper timing. So she didn't want, so Mordecai I think was like her uncle or something, and he when they were looking for a new queen, so the old queen was Queen Vashti, I believe, and the old queen was she had an issue with the king, had an issue with her, so they had her replaced. And they were looking, and so they found Esther, but Mordecai was like, oh well, don't say anything about you being a Jew. And so basically when she in the story of Esther, the way that they kind of her timing was so good, like it was the way she tried to, I mean, she wasn't deceiving the king, but like the way she would bring up things to him was in such a good way and a good time. I think that she always asks for God's timing and, doesn't just do it. And the power didn't get into her head. So she didn't become prideful or things like that. She stayed humble through during the time of waiting before her actual mission. She was there as a queen, but they didn't ask her to do anything until a little bit later.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it is also important to note that the role of Esther in the overall existence of the Jews was at that particular time, if she did not act, the Jews would be totally annihilated and they were
Yeah.
the chosen people of God. So that was the main contribution, really, of Esther, if you put it in historical perspective.
Wow. I was gonna ask y'all too. So, going back to just like her story and thinking about those things, how are her challenges kind of practical towards the challenges that people might face today, and what are the parallels that she faced? And similar to it's a woman, so what are the different kind of things that you can take as a woman to be empowered by that, and vice versa, of like how God can use seemingly people that are kind of on the back burner for his glory. So what do y'all think?
Let me put something here in perspective because it might be important in our understanding of Esther, or particularly the way it was written. Culturally, at the time, remember, the women were not really like relegated to be like equal to men as it is in most cases today. Although women still today thinks that they are not, but I believe they are. But way in the Old Testament, it was a patriarchal society, and therefore women culturally at the time were relegated to like a second role. So they were not put into prominence. And so for Esther to all of a sudden go to the level of prominence was really culturally difficult. Now, so there was that difficulty as a woman. And so we think of a parallel like that in today's world. Number two, many theologians are really criticizing the book for not even having mentioned one word about God in the whole book. And they were saying that this is not really a religious book. But again, there was not even a mention of any religious event. The closest was a fasting without prayer, by the way, only fasting.
Okay.
And they were saying that this is very much like a secular book. But that's where the context, in fact, should be taken, that you don't need to have a mention of literally of God or to have be seen as doing religious events.
Wow.
To be walking in the will of God.
Wow.
So you don't need to be, showing your Bible or saying in your T-shirt, "I am a born-again Christian," to be walking in the will of God. So in this particular book, no mention of God, but the whole story is really about God's intervention.
Wow.
So just to put that in theological context.
What do you think,
Wow,
Karen?
no, that's good. I read it, but I guess it didn't really click that there was no mention of the word, of God, or because back in that time, when they were following Moses's writings and all that, they kind of do it so by the book. We do a certain fasting, certain festivals and all that. And like I said, like Dad said, in this book, they didn't really talk much about that. It was really like a story, like you're reading like a fiction book, just talking about it. But it's kind of like Dad really brought a good point that you don't really have to mention the word God to show that you are a child of God. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to walk around every day and say, "Oh, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian." If you just act that way, people would be drawn to that. And that doesn't mean that just because you're not saying I'm a Christian or I love God every day out loud, like you could say that in your mind, that doesn't mean that you cannot continue to follow God's commandments and be used by him. Because in this context, I guess if you really look at it, so she did tell them. I guess it's, to me, I saw it as implied, because when she was gonna go, talk to the king, so Mordecai told her, "You need to go, like, right now is a time for you." So she's been queen for a long time, and at that time, you can't, it's not like how husbands and wives now are, like, you just walk up to each other and you like discuss. you have to make like an appointment. You have to tell them when you're coming. So he told the king, can I talk to you? And then the king really likes her. So he was like, okay, yeah, you could talk to me. But it's like, oh, I'll talk to you in 3 days. So it wasn't like, I'm gonna talk to you right now. So in 3 days, so she told Mordecai, I need you and the rest of the Jews to fast for this talk that I'm gonna have with the king. And that's pretty big. I think that is an implied, like, I mean, who are they fasting to? I guess is, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you didn't say, well, we're fasting to God, but at that time, they like we know as we read it is that they're fasting to God. So sometimes I feel like that, like some theologians are like trying to take it so literally to where, oh, well, they didn't say the word God, and it's like it's kind of a implied in there, and who else would they be fasting to? But it would, Josh, going back to the question you had about how does this apply now, there's so many times when we are put in a situation that God can still use us, even though we don't have to, like in a regular job, for people that just, you're not in a job that's in a ministry job. Obviously, in a ministry job, it's known that you work in a church. So you're either a pastor, you serve, but you can still be used by God in your regular daily life, in your job, at the grocery store. You just don't know when God will tug on your heartstrings and tell you, go and pay for this lady's groceries, or even sometimes a quick like hi, hello, or if you see someone kind of just like really down on the side, on her car, and you could say, hey, I noticed you're hurting or whatever, can I pray for you? Even something like that, or even just in your workplace. I know, so with Frank, I'm going to use mom as an example. In mom's job, in her current office, her bosses and the employees before mom worked there, they don't really get along much. They don't really have much of a connection. And when mom started working there, she's becoming the bridge between the bosses and the employees. And she tells me all these stories like, oh, my employees want to quit, like the staff wants to quit, but then I tell them not to. Or I think she tries, because in America, you don't really talk about religion much, like in the workplace. But mom told me that because she said, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna teach accounting, but she said, I think that my ministry is kind of like bridging the gap between the employees and the bosses. And you don't even like, she's not even saying the word God daily in her workplace. It just emulates the way she carries herself and the way she shows like kindness to the staff, and how she jokes around with the bosses, and it makes the bosses look like more like normal people than just strict individuals. So I guess like mom would be an example of a real life Esther right now in today's society. So I think that's kind of an answer to a question that you had there, Josh.
Wow.
And one thing that I would like to bring up in relation to that is that Esther was technically considered by the Jews as, in quotation marks, a carnal Jew, meaning a Jew that was not following their traditions and rules. Number one, she was not supposed to marry a Gentile. She married a non-Jew. And then she was taking part technically in the harem culture as one of the women of the before he was chosen. So she was considered like, and she was not following some ceremonies and festivals of the Jews. So technically, she was not a worthy Jew, so to say. And yet, she played a very, very important role to preserve the whole Jewish race. Wow. So here is a woman considered unworthy Jew, but put her life at stake to save the Jews. How is that? So sometimes this outward superficial branding of Christians is not the test of true Christianity. The test of true Christianity in the workplace or everywhere is really your intentions and motives to uphold God and preserve God's kingdom. So in that sense, I think, but before I forget, this is really a sort of a controversial story in a way, because in the in the Old Testament, as I've said, the women do not have the prominence like now. Like women now are really more equal to men. In fact, it is not good to say, but technically at the time, the women really do not control in a way their husbands or men
Yeah.
at the time. Now, well, I just saw a picture sent to me of a guy who went to the drugstore and was buying antidepressant pills in
Okay.
America. And so the drugstore attendant said, "Sir, that those papers are not enough for me to sell the antidepressant pills. Your marriage contract and your wife, your picture of your wife is not enough. I need a prescription from the doctor."
Nice. Nice.
So that never happens in the time of Esther, where men go to drugstores.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the queen, right? The old queen, she pissed off the king, so they just took her out.
Yeah, because she wanted to a little bit control.
Yeah. And so it was quick. Like, they're
Yeah.
like, no, you don't have control and you're done. You're out. So,
So
it's very, if you look at it, like a lot of people, because some people think of it like how it is now. But if you look at it in a cultural standpoint, that is huge back then.
Yeah.
It's even still huge now in like Muslim countries. You know what I'm saying? Like where women are still considered second-class citizens. It's still big for them to be able to do certain things like that. And we're in today's society, so.
Still in Saudi Arabia, when you ride a bus, the women are put to the back of the bus, like they are cargos.
Wow.
The men stay at the front, and there is like 1/5 of the bus for women. When you go and take a plane, a Middle Eastern plane, you will notice that at the end of the airplane, there are 4 seats reserved for women that are covered at the back of Middle Eastern planes, whether it's Saudi Airlines or...
You said that
or
are
Emirates.
covered?
Covered, yes, at the back of the plane. If they are traveling to these countries, and that's supposed to be where those strictly Islamic fundamentals, so to say, would have to stay because they don't want the women to mingle with men. So they're like prisoners at the back.
Yeah, it's pretty different. When I went to Dubai like 2 years ago, there were some women that were still completely covered. All you could see are their eyes. I know that was the case back then, and that's still the case now.
Well, in Saudi Arabia, that's 90% of women.
Yeah,
they're mostly covered. In fact, I joke when I was in Saudi Arabia. So when you take your graduation picture, how do you know who you are?
Oh my gosh.
Question would be, how was Esther's faith, and as far as what to take away from, who she is as a person and what a Christian or not Christian can learn from her character, like what, because you mentioned that, because of her, the Jews were spared, which is very, very big because, it sets the way for just, the entire like lineage of Jesus and all these different things. And so, just thinking about these different aspects, like what can you take away from Esther's life, her relationship with God, that's very like marveling, that's very like, that you marvel at it and that you kind of think, I want to emulate that. It's Christ-like. So
yeah,
I think courage and timing are two important features of Esther's faith. She was really courageous. She was actually willing to approach the king at the risk of losing her queenship. She might lose being queen, so she risked all that just to save his people. That's courage, but she did it at the right timing. So courage has to be coupled with timing, because pure courage without timing may be suicide.
right.
and time and waiting for the right timing without courage is cowardice.
Right.
Oh,
So
wow.
so it's a combination of both. You keep on waiting for the right time, you're really a coward. But if you just
Right.
go ahead without proper timing, you might just be committing suicide. And so uh, timing and courage is very important in the exercise of faith, even today.
I think for me, I think I would say like her faith is obviously really strong with God. Um, although a lot of, although theologians are saying that it wasn't specifically in there, to me, I think it's implied. Because sometimes, like Dad said, you don't really have to literally say it, because sometimes that just sounds kind of superficial, like you're saying it, but are you really walking that kind of life?
Right.
And I think that Esther was.
Right.
Just by trusting in God when when they said that, okay, you're gonna be queen, or you're gonna be chosen as queen, and waiting her turn. Also, she is a little bit like, I would say, like grace, like she carries herself with grace and eloquence, but she's also kind of savage, because this one part when, so she goes, so she knows who it's, Haman, right? The guy, the bad guy. He wants to kill the Jews. They know, she knows this now. But she didn't just go to the king and was like, yeah, Haman, he wants to kill the Jews, and I'm a Jew, and that's messed up, and I don't want you to kill my people. He was like, she said it in such a good way, where she said, okay, well, she set it up so well. First of all, she set it up so well and said, well, what do you think about like the Jews? Like, should we kill them? Things like that. And he's like, well, no. He's like, well, and then Mordecai did something for the king, like something nice. He's like, well, there's a man out there that helped me, and then he was a Jew by the gates. And he's like, yeah, someone wants to kill that man, the man that helped you. And then that's, she told the king that, right? And they're at this dinner. And she's like, well, why? That man is really nice, helped me out. I couldn't remember exactly what Mordecai did. And he said, well, who wanted to kill him? And they're all in this dinner, right? And she's like, yeah, right here, Haman did. Like right there in the middle of like dinner, she like set it up so well, got the king into her corner in a non-judgmental, like pushy way. And then she kind of just said, oh yeah, it was Haman. So to me, like the way that the way she carried herself, and the way that she spoke, and clearly you couldn't come up with something like that without God. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think a normal person, if they said, oh, your people are going to be killed, they usually act out of emotion, and they would say, oh, well, I got to do something, hurry up and do something now. She waited for God's timing. She had the courage, but she also had like the grace, like a graceful way of doing it, and was very eloquent in doing it. But it was like so good that like even Haman was like, oh, wait, what? Like, he had no idea. He was invited to the dinner and everything. So I think that's a pretty big attribute, I guess, or like a character of Esther that I personally would like to follow, because sometimes we cannot, especially as women are already very emotional beings. Like, I feel like that's just how we're made already. And so sometimes we're like 0 to 100 so quick. Like, I know I can go 0 to 100 so fast, but like sometimes we have to really just take a step back and ask God, like, is this how I'm supposed to be acting? Is this how I'm supposed to be reacting to something? I think we talked about this last week with Elijah, and how Elijah's so dramatic. That's how women are. Women can get really dramatic too. And we have to just realize that we just have to like take a step back, and like that, I think that's what I liked about Esther the most, is like, she did not let her emotions, because if someone told you like, hey, you might be the only last Jew left because they will kill everybody, that would make you very, very emotional, and you could just lash out. But Esther did not. So
Yeah, just before I forget, so maybe Tesla should be called by a woman's name, because it can go from 0 to 100 so fast.
There it is. A good one.
There it is.
Exactly. It's a good line. It's a good line.
It's a good line. Now, but the other thing in Esther's faith is really here is no mention of God here, but place is the
Right.
fasting part. She asked
Right.
her supporters to fast while he would approach the king.
Right.
And fasting, while it didn't say they were praying, it goes without mentioning that in the Old Testament, when you fast, you focus your attention on God. You
Right.
don't eat, you deprive yourselves of all the good things so that you can
Right.
focus on God. And he was therefore asking people to intercede for him via fasting. And
Wow.
that to me was the faith part in that
Wow.
in Esther's life. Yeah.
Wow. Right. Wow. That's so good. And also, I was gonna say, just like to, kind of a quick like show people like the weight of this, like Esther, right? Like the context behind it is that if she didn't stick out for her people, they'd be dead. But also thinking about the aspect of like if Esther knew going ahead that it could be a suicide mission because it was insane because she literally was willing to risk her life for a big, risk, a big chance of dying. Because when Kira said take the queen out, it means kill the person, right?
Yeah,
Like,
they did kill they didn't kill her right away, but then she got a little bit vindictive, so they ended up killing her.
so then that's the aspect that in those times is that that's how you kind of get rid of a person is you take him out, kill him. So it's not getting fired, but it's losing your life. And so it's really interesting to think about that that's the case. She was willing to risk her life for her people that carried the way for God's people to show up. Now my question is real quickly, what does that show then in God's character of, because this could be the biggest moment in the entire Jewish thing, right? Population, then what does it show when God called a woman to lead the people in this manner? What does that mean?
I think it shows, so obviously at that time culturally, women did not have a big, they were considered like second class. But I think by God using a woman to do this kind of, it's so important. God is showing people that women are not second class citizens, that he created us equal, and that it's kind of showing that like, hey, you guys kind of got your situation backwards, because the
Right.
exact the exact people that you don't let lead or give them enough like I said, leadership capabilities, that's the exact
Right.
person that's going to save you. So I think it kind of shows. I know a lot of people, I know a lot of like, I don't know if you say feminists would say, well, the Bible is a little sexist, they only talk about men. But I think that this specific story shows that God using a woman to basically save the entire race is so important, and it shows that God doesn't see women as a second class citizen and that he sees us as equal.
Right.
So
Right. That's good. That's
I
a good
think
word.
that that's what I think God is kind of saying in that aspect.
Yeah, well, in many other countries other than America, there were already women presidents. In the Philippines, we already had at least I think two women presidents. In New Zealand, is a
The woman right now,
prime
yeah.
minister. Yeah,
Wow.
prime minister in Sri Lanka. Well, in America, you still up to vice president. So I think if there is a country that has not really put women as equal to men, it could be America, unfortunately.
Right.
We don't have a woman president yet.
Yeah, Hillary wanted to almost, but did not. So, but yes, you don't immaterial. God can use whoever, in my view, man or woman, if he has a mission to do.
And then so with that, just thinking about, other things, what other kind of insights do y'all have that you may have think we left out, and what's another, kind of takeaway from Esther that you want to tell the viewers out there or the listeners? Is there anything that you're thinking of? And then maybe after that, wrap it up, a little more questions. So
Okay.
You all
From my
think?
end, let us not lose sight of the sovereignty of God. It's the same style that God has been doing over and over again, of putting people in advance, so that when the crisis will come, there is one already ready to address that crisis. That is true of our lives as well. You will be surprised that there are things God put way ahead, so that when you get into crisis, this thing or person will be the one to help you out. Now
Wow.
notice the like of Joseph, so negative things, but he was sent to Egypt way ahead to save again the Jewish nation from hunger during the time of the famine. It's the same thing now with Esther. Esther was positioned there as queen at the right time to do the role to stop the total annihilation of the Jews.
Right.
Always like that. God always works like that in history. So
Wow.
He's the same God that works like that in our lives. There are people we meet today, and we see that was really a nonsense meeting that person. No significance today. Yes, that person may have no significance today, but 10 years down the road, you will meet him again. You will realize that if you do not know him 10 years back, you will not be able to convince him now on something that God has prepared you to do. So I have seen that in my life. People who did not matter, or things or connections that did not matter 10, 20 years before, only mattered now.
Wow.
But it would not have mattered if you did not know that person way back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
So
Basically,
it's positioning.
Yeah, it's like God sees the big picture, but we only really see the now. We only see what's going on with us now. So if we see, I think I've used this analogy with you before too, Josh, but let's say you're going through, like the Joseph story, you're going through an issue, right? So you're walking down this road and you see a boulder. You're like, I'm gonna go back.
Right.
But
Exactly.
I can't go past it. It's too heavy. I can't move it. I can't I can't go over it or whatever, right? So you're gonna walk back. So we start going back to sin, or going back to something we used to do before, something we've been delivered from. But really, God sees it as if he had a drone over this path, right? And in the path, God sees that boulder was so small, and literally right after that, it's like this perfect garden. But we have to just trust on God. So I'm seeing it as, God using, we have to just trust on God's timing. We have to always ask God for his insight, because if we lose sight of that, we would end up going back. Esther could have just been like, you know what? I'm queen now. I'm not going to do anything. Sorry. It sucks that that's happening to you guys, but I'm out. She could have done that and she wouldn't have to risk anything. But because she followed God, something so much more fruitful happened. Literally an entire race was saved from her actions and from following God. So to me, I think what I wanted the viewers to know is, no matter what it is that you're going through, I always say everything happens for a reason. And it's like cliche, and people are probably like, man, I know. But I think that everything really happens for a reason, because God's always got a plan. We don't see it, but other people, God sees it, but we don't understand it. So
it's good. And then, so with that said, what's the point of Esther? And just give a kind of quick, kind of bullet point, spark note thing people can take for the week or for their lives. So you all think?
Again, to me, it doesn't matter who you are. God sees your heart, and you can be called by God to do a really important role, like Esther. And so when that comes before you, take the courage, like Esther did.
Yeah. And I think mine kind of piggybacks off of Dad. So he said it doesn't matter who you are, right? So to me, it doesn't matter where you are. God would still use you. So it could be at work, it could be in school, You might feel like you don't have anybody to minister to, or you don't know
Right.
how, or you're too scared, or you're nervous.
Right.
But really just always like living in God's will and just doing what God wants you to do, you're influencing someone somehow. They may not say anything, but you are. So to me, I
Good.
think it doesn't matter where you are. God can always still use you in his own way and in his own time.
Wow. Really well said. And, it's awesome. That's very encouraging that that's the aspect that guy, girl, old, young, that, male, female, God can use anybody who is willing to be used, right? As long as you say, God, like, help me, go before me and prepare my way and let me delight my ways in you so that I know what the next steps to take. Because the idea there too, before we go, is the aspect of timing, right? Timing is very important, because if we don't lean towards God's voice in a way, like, timing becomes off. And so that's why we have to allow the Holy Spirit kind of every single day. And so, like, that's the main thing, is just relying on the Holy Spirit to guide us and keep us kind of in that, like, zone, so that we're able to do that. But with that said, I could pray us out real quick and then we could be done.
Good.
So, all right, dear God, thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. Thank you so much for being that bridge that we're able to, kind of just rely on you, and you be the gap in whatever career we have, whatever calling we have, that you're the one that sets our ways. You're the one that sets our path. Help us continue to walk in that narrow path, the narrow road. Help us never forget who we are. Help us know too that no matter how far we've drifted apart from you, that we can always come back, knowing that you have just your arms wide open, that you're always there to take us back. And thank you so much that you have big plans, and that we just need to take each step and don't, be wary of the small days, but allow the days to pile up so that it could glorify your name. And it just allows us to be closer to you the way Esther did, and empower men and women all over the world to know you and to want to be leaders, especially in this time of tribulation, even in time of triumph. Help us also yearn towards you and yearn towards your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Cool.